I work at the Pediatric Hospital auf der Bolt in Hanover, Germany, as an anesthetist. There isn't a specialized profession, pediatric anesthesia, but that's the specialty that I practice, even without the name. I also work as an emergency care physician. So I have additional job titles, as is often the case with anesthetists, who tend to be multifunctional. I work in the intensive care unit, a pediatric intensive care unit with 8 beds, with ventilation beds. We serve as a center for severe burn wounds. I also work in an outpatient capacity for the wards in the hospital. Before I decided to pursue a career in medicine, I also thought about working in theatre. I was very attracted to theatre, and I went through some of the training steps in this direction, and found lighting and working as a lighting technician for the stage to be the most interesting thing. And I think this interest in theatre has provided me with a sort of outside view for what I do here in the hospital. I think that as a theatre person, it's in fact the case that you look at your surroundings, your interactions with people, all of these things with a different view, with another set of eyes. And with this background, it's an extremely important point for me to look at how I'm behaving, how I'm interacting with people, and how that's affecting them. I think that in a children's hospital, I'm at a very sensitive point. I'm directly confronted with the fears of parents and children because they see me in my role as an anesthetist as giving a special sort of support. Basically, I have a sort of transitional function, one might say. The children come from their normal lives and have to have an operation. And this interface is the challenging thing. How does one support the parents and the children through this moment? How can you help them get ready, for example, in preparatory talks? And then there is also this immediate situation where the child has to undergo anesthesia and the mother has to leave the child. That has always been a very big topic for me, how to manage the separation of child and parent. And this subject, how to deal with the fears of this moment, is something that preoccupies me very much. In this situation, everything takes on a special meaning, everything gets interpreted. You hear that also from parents telling us about their experiences. It's like an accident data logger is running during this time immediately prior to the operation. What the anesthetist says at this point becomes incredibly important because one feels so helpless. You can't help but be affected by it when you see the fears that people have at this point. It's such an existential fear. No one wants to be injured. There's a basic feeling, our physicality should not be damaged. And it's all about attachment, the bond between mother and child, or between parents and children. There has to be a separation as the operation begins. The parents have to leave. The children stay there for the operation. There are huge fears that come over a father or a mother and a child in this situation in a hospital. The critical question is, how will this moment be managed? How will you experience it when you have to leave your child behind? And then on top of this, there is something like social fears. With young people, there is also a sort of feeling of physical shame or fears about being judged. You're there in the public view, so to speak, and you don't want to be judged. And this is what I'm taking care of, a process that I'm a part of. And I have an effect on my patients. I come there for the anesthesia induction, and as the anesthetist, it might well be that I come a little bit later because I've been working on something else. And you, as the patient, are waiting there for the anesthesia to begin, and you're looking at your surroundings and examining them in the utmost detail. You're perceiving everything. How does the room affect you? How is it when, as the patient, I look at the ceiling and I see a fluorescent tube and there are dead flies lying in it because the cleaning hasn't been done? Then I feel the same way myself. I think my way into the situation, and it acquires a huge significance. It really does matter how these rooms and spaces are managed. And as a physician, I'm noticing these things. We work in a building that was built in the 1980s, at a time when functionality in healthcare was the main focus. And for a long time, it has been so that a sort of mechanistic thinking has predominated. Even though each of us as people, as individuals, don't want this, each of us thinks, I'm more than just my physical functions. I want to be seen as a real person with all my humanity. There are two areas where I've been able to make some changes, and I think I'd like to start by describing the smaller one that I could implement at our hospital. It has to do with the situation in which we do venipuncture. We had an examination room for doing this, and in this examination room I've developed a sofa. And the idea here is simply to have some furniture where mother and child can sit next to each other, that they have a place where they can relax together and can regenerate. With a regeneration zone like this, they can share a space together and can read a book together, this sort of thing. We need to think about what sort of furnishings, what sort of surroundings allow patients to feel better. How can the mother and child be close to one another? And previously, that simply wasn't available. There were only roller stools, which were uncomfortable. And that was it. Nothing more. Nothing at all. And in this situation, I developed a piece of furniture that made it possible for mother and child to sit next to each other. And I've noticed a very clear effect. When I have children who are not so afraid, then I can establish another sort of contact with them. I have a new opportunity when my colleagues call me in to place a new venous access. When I have to prick 4 or 5 times to get the vein, for example, this new situation gives me a new basis for maintaining trust with a young patient in a difficult situation. So this was the new furniture. The other new installation has involved much more planning and passion. This was a very elaborate light design that we've installed in our intensive care unit. And in the ICU, I felt partly responsible for the previous situation, where there was simply a light switch and the light in the room would be turned on. Boom. The light goes on and the 3 or 4 children who were in the room would be woken up when I had to go to the ICU at night and take a look. And that was a lighting situation that I found highly disturbing as a person with a background in theatre, as a person who knew the possibilities of what lighting can do. And I thought, okay, what can I do to improve this situation? I wanted to do something to change the lighting situation, and the only option was to add something to the existing lighting situation, because the basic type of light there is standardized. It's necessary to have a clear white light to be able to evaluate the patients. And so I had the possibility to install an additional lighting system in the ICU. This was an LED line that used colored light. This lighting line was my basic idea. I wanted to have a 24-hour cycle. I wanted to have the lighting atmosphere move through the different times of the day. It should start with the feeling of a sunrise at the beginning of the day and go through the course of one day. At noontime, yellow light would be more dominant. Towards the afternoon, it should become more orange and red. You can imagine that as going through the colors, like in Goethe's color wheel. And knowing about the effects of light, it was clear to me that no single color would be sufficient, and so we were able to install graphics for the full range of colors. We installed a sophisticated programming system in the background. And in the background, we had the possibility to say, okay, I'm now going to the first bed, and I press on 1, and then I have a small dimmer wheel, and I can evaluate and look at the patient in this single bed. In effect, we created a differentiated light installation with a lot of ideas and possibilities built into it, which can be controlled in a highly differentiated way. And finally, it works with a light panel with various touch panels installed. At the moment, economic considerations are very much at the center of managing things in the hospitals. And I think finally here there's a human decision that has to be made. How can we influence decision makers to put people and their needs more in focus in the hospital? Not this mechanism, this view of the hospital as a repair operation, but human needs have to be considered. We want to be taken care of, to feel safe in the hospital, and the choice to have it that way is based on a view of who we are and what our culture is really based on. We need to take a broader view and look at the phenomenon of the hospital with a broader perspective. We need to leave this conception of the hospital as a sort of repair shop and see it as a basic and very important area of life. I think it's a philosophical question. How are we going to deal with this area? And I think we need to communicate that to the decision makers. And we need to make another decision regarding how healthcare is financed. And maybe this is also a political question. I think whoever wants to identify this as their position should do so and stand up for it. I think at the moment it's a sign of the times that the general public has such a fear of hospitals and there's so much misunderstanding. I think we should respond to this situation, should deal with the topic of fear and the hospital, also in connection with staffing in the hospital. How do the people feel who work there? This also affects us. I think this is a sign of the times, and we need to change our view of things. Only taking an economic view of hospital management leads to decisions that have very negative consequences when economics and egocentric thinking are the focus of everything. When this is the case, we simply don't feel like we're being perceived and treated like people should be treated.